Welcome to License to Spend with Tim Whisler from the Whisler Agency. Immerse yourself in expert insights on financial strategies that will empower you to confidently navigate your way to retirement freedom. Join us on this journey towards financial confidence. It's time to take control of your financial future.
During our working years, we become accustomed to a consistent paycheck every couple of weeks or every month. Well, when we get to retirement, it's up to us to find a way to turn our lump sum of money into that stream of income. And there can be some challenges to create a consistent income that you cannot outlive. And that's why the number one fear of retirees is running out of money. Tim, what are the biggest challenges you see folks facing when they try to generate that retirement income on their own?
You know, Patrice, it didn't seem like it was all that long ago where we had that three-legged stool that talked about how to create that, foundation of income. You had, the one leg of the stool were pensions. Another leg of the stool was Social Security. And that third and final leg was their savings. Well, we kind of know what's happening to pensions these days, right? They're kind of starting to slowly sunset.
Mm-hmm.
Social Security, we're hearing talk about they might have to start reducing benefits sometime in the near future. Also, too, whatever that Social Security payout is, a lot of times we see that, it only covers a portion of what maybe somebody's expenses are. So basically it just kind of falls back on the shoulders of, for the retiree, that they're the ones that kind of have to, turn to their assets and understand how to convert that lump sum of savings, into that consistent paycheck. And I kind of feel as though, the majority of the wealth that people have accumulated in their tax deferred accounts, which also means now they got to pay some taxes every time they take a withdrawal. So those are some of the common challenges that we see as folks start to, venture into retirement and create that retirement income plan.
And, you haven't even mentioned inflation, market volatility, or that topic I always love, sequence of returns risk. I know we're going to get into that later on.
Right.
But we do have some stats here from the 2023 Schroders U.S. Retirement Survey.
Mm-hmm.
They questioned 2,000 U.S. investors nationwide and found 49% said they do not have a retirement income strategy. They're just going to take money from their accounts when they need it. 57% said they are concerned about not having regular paychecks in retirement. And 23% said they were terrified.
Oh, boy.
So in your experience, what do you typically see happen when folks who do not have a written income plan retire?
It's interesting when you share those statistics. That's really kind of the premise behind why I wrote the book and why I titled it the way I did. So we really kind of see, for folks who don't really have the key factor of what I call having a written plan, there's basically two outcomes that we see. Either they, number one, overspend their resources, which increases the likelihood of them running out of money. They have not sat down. They don't understand what they need in expenditures. They don't know what they want, in expenditures. Like if they want to take some trips, how much is this going to cost? Not really planning for that. So therefore, they can tend to overspend, and therefore they potentially shorten the longevity of that retirement account. Number two, the other side of the coin, we see people underspend their resources, really kind of focused in on what that 23% said that they were. They were kind of terrified or they're fearful of running out of money. So they live kind of what we call that just in case retirement lifestyle. And really neither situation is ideal when we really truly want to enjoy those years of retirement.
Let's go back. You mentioned the book. Talk
Yes.
about the book.
So the book, we titled that License to Spend. It's a retirement plan based upon income as opposed to if-come. Now, again, I don't think if-come is a word that we can use in Scrabble. So if we play, I don't use the word. But what we see, Patrice, is the fact that just like that survey said, 49% don't have a retirement strategy. They said they're just going to take the withdrawal, from the accounts when they need it. That's one out of every two households do that. That's really what if-come is. If we don't take out too much, and if the stock market doesn't go down too bad, and if we're not into a different tax bracket, if,
Mm-hmm.
that's where people can find themselves into a heap of trouble because they don't have that written plan. So that's kind of what the book is designed to do. I like to hand that book out almost like a glorified business card to simply say, look, This is what we've learned in our years of experience of helping people with retirement income planning. This book is certainly not a DIY. But it certainly can kind of maybe just start the conversation of saying, hey, look, these are different things that we feel as though are important to address as we step into retirement to give you kind of, again, that key factor of having a written financial retirement plan for your overall retirement.
One of the rules of thumb that many people probably have heard, it's the 4% rule. And this is what you're supposed to be following in your retirement accounts. It's what you take out. But tell us a little bit more about that and why you don't use it with your clients.
Yeah, the 4% rule was created back in the mid 90s. I think it was around 1994, so thereabouts. And it was basically a plethora of calculations to determine how long your retirement assets would last you in retirement. So basically, what they did was, and they ran thousands of Monte Carlo simulations. And basically, the premise of the rule was you need to reallocate your portfolio into a 60 to 40 stock to bond ratio, 60% of your money in stocks, 40% of your money in bonds, and then withdraw 4% of your starting balance. And that should provide income for 30 years. Now, again, that 4% rule does not guarantee that you'll have the income you cannot outlive, and your income is still subject to lots of risk. So that's kind of what they, created. They said, okay, well, back in the mid 90s, when this rule was created, there was an adverse relationship between stocks and bonds. If one was down, the other one was up. I dare argue that's not the case anymore. In fact, as you go back and you look at that study, there are many professionals out there. I'm talking like economists and people of finance, not financial advisors, but people at this level of degree and knowledge saying, look, if you're going to follow this type of a rule, you better dial back the 4% withdrawal rate down to about 2 point something. It's really lowered over the years because, again, of interest rates are different now and market volatility is always lingering. So, the 4% rule is still very, very popular. I literally just had a conversation with some prospective clients not too long ago, and they brought it up. I hadn't heard it in a little while now, but they brought it up saying this is kind of what we've understood. So we're kind of starting to gear our retirement income plan maybe around that 4% rule. And we'd certainly love to get your thoughts on that. But that's why I really don't like to use it, because it truly is the premise of having an if-come plan as opposed to an income plan.
And you mentioned market volatility. Now, face it, the market's been a little bit volatile lately.
Right.
This is what gets to me with the sequence of returns. Somebody coming into retirement now has a very different scenario to look at versus someone who went into retirement, let's say a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, the sequence of returns risk is not something that we really truly get concerned with during our working years, because we're not taking withdrawals from our assets. So therefore, we can kind of focus more in on, what is that average return on investment? What's the average rates of return that we're getting for our investment? Well, to your point, Patrice, it all changes. It all shifts when we come into retirement. We now have to start taking withdrawals from those assets because we need income for retirement, right? So therefore, the sequence of the returns matters. It matters as far as how much are we withdrawing and what is the actual performance of that asset that's earmarked for retirement. So therefore, are we retiring in a bear market? The markets are down. Are we retiring in a good market where the markets are up? It really does matter as far as the sequence of the returns to determine, number one, how much income can we safely withdraw? Because number two, we don't want to jeopardize the longevity or how long that account value will last, again, due to the sequence of the returns inside of that asset we need for retirement income.
Right. All right, Tim, a lot of advisors don't talk about income planning. Mm-hmm. In fact, they're good at helping people grow their money. They're very good at that. Mm-hmm. But it requires a different skill set and a specialty to focus on being a retirement income planner like yourself. Mm-hmm. What do you do differently, though, for the people you work with?
Well, we like to kind of let people understand, unfortunately, in my world that I live in, we don't have a referral system like we do in the healthcare system, right? We've talked about this before, but I think it's a good analogy where a person goes and sees their primary care physician to kind of get that overall bill of health, right? How are things looking on the inside compared to the outside, et cetera. And if our primary care physician doesn't really like what that, lab report just came back with, or they don't really like what they're seeing maybe on some other type of a test, what do? They refer you to a specialist, right? That specialist and your primary care physician both have the title of doctor, but they look at your bodies differently. It's the same thing in the financial services world. A retirement income planner, such as myself, can be termed as the title of a financial advisor, but not every financial advisor is a retirement income planner. So, really, how we differentiate ourselves is helping clients understand that we really reside in that second phase of life called the distribution phase, known as retirement. So, when you start taking income from those assets that you saved and sacrificed and built for decades, there are elements of risk involved, like sequence of returns, market volatility. We haven't even touched on taxes yet. All those different types of challenges, can really impact the value of that asset. So therefore, we help our clients understand that the importance of having a written financial plan that's geared towards creating some elements of safety on a portion of the overall assets, and ideally creating an income plan that's going to fund them with the retirement income they need for retirement. So basically what we're able to do, Patrice, is we take an overall holistic assessment of everything. We look at all of their dollars and we look at it through the lenses of how is the IRS going to get involved? If we're following the rules of, like everybody does, tax deferred accounts, well, that's perfectly fine because we haven't paid the taxes during all those years that we've accumulated those assets. So now we come to retirement and we start to do what? Take withdrawals.
Right.
And now here comes the IRS knocking on a door saying, okay, you remember us? You're going to start taking some income from these assets. You're going to pay us our share. So that's kind of the differentiating factor of what separates us from other, financial advisors, if you will. They might be focused in on helping people build wealth. We focus in on helping people distribute their wealth and creating that retirement roadmap for them to have the income they need in retirement.
Well, when people come to see you for the first time and you start to build an income plan for them, where do you start?
We really kind of start with what I really enjoy having, what I call that get acquainted conversation. I just have a couple of pieces of paper in front of me, and I'm asking them all kinds of questions just to kind of get to know them. I'm asking a lot of open-end, where, when, why, how questions. And, ultimately, as I get to know them a little bit more and understand their time frame, are we close to retirement? Are in retirement already? What do we want to do with retirement? What are your concerns about retirement? One of the things that I always ask them is, how much income do you need? How much income do you want? Describe for me. You've got a blank canvas. You've got the brush in your hand. You're the artist. Paint that perfect ideal retirement income plan for me. Tell me what you want to do. Oh, I want to do some traveling. Okay, what does that mean? What does travel mean, right? Paint back, give me the picture of that. Are we going to do maybe explore some hobbies, maybe volunteer a little bit, go see the kids and grandkids, take them to Disney, different things like that. So that way, then I can kind of understand not only what do they want to do in retirement, but also more importantly, how much income are they going to need for retirement? So therefore, we kind of start with that, just the different strategies of income that you need, and then again, the income that you want.
Talk some more about the strategies for the income you need.
Sure. So for example, if you think about how we break down our wants and our needs, okay? So the needs, right? Food, clothing, shelter, right? Insurance, property taxes, everything that we have to sustain a certain lifestyle. Those are our needs. We want to make sure those are covered. Normally, what we like to see is, okay, if we have the blessing of having Social Security benefits coming in, husband and wife together, or if we're talking to a single person, what are those dollar amounts for Social Security? Let's track those dollar amounts. Maybe we still have the opportunity for a pension, right? What do those dollar amounts look like? So I think that way then we can utilize those two reliable streams of income and making sure that those at least cover the needs. If there's still some funds that are needed, and maybe we have other assets we can tap into, then our job is to create that tax efficient withdrawal strategy. So that way, then we can, ideally, we want to cover the needs based upon the guaranteed sources like Social Security and pension. And then obviously, once we have that written plan, then we can start looking about, okay, well, we want to do this and we want to do this in retirement. Perfect. We're going to make sure that we have that plan because, Patrice, like we've talked before, those three phases of retirement, the go-go years, the slow go years, and the no-go years, right? So those
Yeah.
go-go years, again, giving all the credit to Tom Hegna for coining those phrases. That's what we want to do. We want to be able to create that stream of income from their assets to complement Social Security and a pension. So that way, then the needs and the wants are all being met again with that written retirement roadmap.
How do some people take it when they look at their needs and then they look at their wants, and the wants maybe push them over the edge? You gotta do something else if you really want these wants.
Yeah, it's sometimes those are the conversations that aren't really quite as fun because unfortunately I have to almost have to play a little bit of takeaway, if you will.
Yeah.
Basically what we have to do is let's just use the example. Maybe somebody's not quite to retirement yet, and maybe they're 62 and they're targeting retirement at 65. So maybe we have 3 years yet before they're actually pull the plug on their full-time income. So basically it just kind of has to boil down of maybe them having to work maybe a little bit longer or spend a little bit less, in retirement. If we don't quite meet those, if we don't quite meet those wants, from the assets that we have, maybe we have to maybe make a little bit of an alteration to it. If there's a way for us to maybe convert some of their assets into a guaranteed stream of income, as long as it's the right fit, we might be able to address those, wants through that type of a source of a solution, if you will. So basically, it's just unfortunately, it's a conversation. We kind of look back at the numbers and we look at the time frame and say, okay, look, here's your overall portfolio. Here's the assets that you have. Here's the income we have coming in. If we haven't turned on Social Security yet, that's another conversation. How do we optimize those payouts to again provide the income that we want to have in retirement to cover the wants and the needs?
Is the conversation about the same when you find out that the income sources don't meet the income needs?
It can be, yes. Yep, absolutely. Because in fact, a lot of times I think one of the biggest challenges that folks face is understanding that there has to be significant consideration given to how are our assets allocated. Because again, if we think about this, we talked about this in the last episode, we talked about the psychology of retirement, right? There also has to come a physical allocation as well. So therefore, for 40 plus years, for most people, they have been geared towards growth, 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 right? Trying to save as much as they can, trying to get the best return on investment as they can for all those decades. Now we come to retirement. And now they're talking to retirement income planner. And I'm like, okay, your portfolio is geared towards growth. We now need to gear it towards income. And sometimes that's a little bit difficult for people to get their head wrapped around. And that's not no fault of their own. I'm the one who's coming up with the bad news and say, look, what you're doing is not wrong. It's just incomplete. So we have to kind of shift some things around a little bit just for the fact of now we're doing something you've never done before. We are now needing to take withdrawals from those assets. Therefore, we may have to shift the allocations around a little bit to making sure that we've got the element of safety involved. We've got the element of still some growth in there, and we definitely want to have some liquidity in there. But since we can't get all three of those features in one particular solution, we basically pair them off. And now we create multiple buckets, and now every bucket that we have in that portfolio has purpose. Therefore, we have a better chance of meeting the income needs that they want and the income needs that they absolutely have to have in retirement.
How do you deal with inflation?
Well, I love this one because I always go back to Warren Buffett's 2 rules of investment. And this guy is, you talk about a guy who's been very successful, but he basically has 2 rules, right? Rule number 1 is never lose money. Rule number 2 is refer to rule number 1, right?
Right.
So I think the most important factor about inflation is really kind of abiding by that whole premise of saying, look, we have to kind of change our mindset a little bit. We have to kind of understand the element of instead of chasing yields to eliminating volatility. Now, again, that's not a one size fit all, and that's not putting all your eggs in one basket. It's just understanding that, look, we need to take income from our assets, and we need to understand that cost of goods and services are going to increase over time. That's what inflation is. So therefore, I think how we do that is, I think number one, it's important for people to understand that we have to absolutely have some funds protected from volatility. Therefore, they're going to be there for us whenever we need to take some income. And ideally, if we can create a couple different buckets of money, now I think we have a better chance of battling inflation by being able to pick a bucket of money to take the withdrawals, depending upon how those funds are performing with the stock market, how much are going to be taxed every time we take a withdrawal, et cetera. You can obviously imagine the rabbit hole goes a little bit deep as we start to create that overall income plan. But that's the first rule that we always look at, making sure that we have a chance to battle inflation by making sure we have a majority of our funds protected from loss due to market volatility.
And that's a risk. And how do you help your clients avoid risk?
Well, I kind of alluded to it just a second ago by talking about safety, growth, and liquidity. This is really, Patrice, the whole premise by helping people understand that having a diversified portfolio is not enough in retirement, right? Because let's just simply define diversification, right? It's basically that whole element of not putting all your eggs in one basket, right? That's usually the common answer that I get for folks. Well, let's look at the three major indexes: the S&P 500, the Dow Jones 30, and the NASDAQ 100. Are those diversified? I think so, right? We've got 630 different companies, therefore in all different sectors, all in different, areas of expertise. But can they lose money? They sure can. So that's usually what we help our clients understand by saying, look, in order for us to start mitigating against risk, diversification is not enough. We have to have a balanced portfolio. And that again it's in our book. We talk about that inside of that book and understand, look, safety, growth, and liquidity. We have to bring in certain elements of each of those key benefits and apply them to overall assets, because when we need to take an income or create an income stream, I should say, and take withdrawals, therefore we have to have some buckets of money that we can use to our advantage, regardless of what the stock market is doing. So I think that's it's really the key point of understanding that as we transition into retirement, we need to alter and possibly reallocate some of the funds from a diversified portfolio over to a balanced portfolio.
Lots of stuff to consider here, changing your mindset, even in some cases, Tim. Is there something that we have not touched on, though, you want to make sure we do?
I think it all starts with simply having a conversation, right? It goes back to that adage of we don't know what we don't know. We don't like to admit when we don't know things. There's that element of pride involved. But, I go back to that survey you just shared with us a few minutes ago. Those numbers sadden me because it doesn't have to be that way, right? I just encourage folks to understand, be gracious to yourself. You understood what your job was and your expertise was for 40 plus years. Now you're getting ready to embark upon a journey you've never walked before. You don't know what the path looks like. You don't know exactly what to expect. So therefore, we have that element of potentially of fear. Fear can lead to some frustration. Fear can lead to worry, can lead to doubt. It all can be mitigated when we have a plan. And that is what our focus is. We have the conversation, that get acquainted conversation. We take inventory of our clients' assets. If we've not turned on Social Security yet, we want to understand what their options are at their full retirement age. Should we turn it on prior to that? Should we defer it till 70? Do they have a pension? How do we maximize the pension? We take in consideration, Patrice, all of those elements of assets that those clients have and sit down with them and provide them with that written map. Because then, and again, I can only speak from experience of helping scores and scores of clients. And again, a lot of our clients that work with us were so gracious to share a testimonial on the back of that book that we have. I love giving out that book and saying, look, forget chapters 1, 2, and 3, go to the back, start at the very back. Because my favorite part of the book is understanding how that roadmap impacted people's lives. And that's really why we're here. We reside in this phase of life to help people understand, look, we're going to walk right alongside of you. We're going to provide you with that roadmap. We're always going to refer back to that roadmap on a regular basis. And now you've got clarity. Now you've got certainty. You've got a plan. And folks, I'm just here to tell you, those folks who have that plan are the ones who have the better chance of realizing that ideal retirement that they've dreamed of for all those years during their working years and saving and sacrificing. Now they can enjoy those golden years and enjoy that journey because now they have a game plan, they have a roadmap.
And now's the time to ask questions if they don't have one. So, Tim, how can they reach you to ask those questions?
So they can get a hold of us pretty easily. Number one, they can go to our website, www.thewhistleragency.com. And again, Whisler is Whisler. They can reach us by email, tim@thewhistleragency.com. And they can reach us by phone, area code 309-291-04 91.
Plan that retirement income strategy now. Talk to Tim. And follow and share this podcast too. I'm Patrice Sikora, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you for listening to License to Spend. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The views expressed herein reflect the views of the Whisler Agency. As of the date of publication, these views may change as conditions change. The views expressed herein are not intended and should not be construed as investment advice, and they do not address any individual's specific situation. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of the Whisler Agency. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Investment advisory and financial planning services are offered through Foundations Investment Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Insurance, consulting, and education services are offered through the Whisler Agency. The Whisler Agency is a separate and unaffiliated entity from Foundations Investment Advisors, LLC. This podcast is designed to provide general information on subjects covered pursuant to IRS Circular 230. It is not intended to provide specific legal or tax advice and cannot be used to avoid penalties or to promote, market, or recommend any tax plan or arrangement for insurance products discussed guarantees or backed by the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company.